be a sponge, and then bring the juice.
By focusing on your improvement, by focusing on your progress, and eliminating any fixed mindset that you may have and acts of perfectionism, then you encourage your own mastery.
On some level, we do what we want to do 24 hours a day. Now, sometimes it may not seem like that, but if I'm choosing to work instead of sleep, what I'm actually saying is keeping my job is more important than sleeping.
I'm tired of this. I'm tired of getting beat. What can I do to get over this hump? So mentally, that's when I kind of put that forefront, like, hey, it's either all or nothing.
I like to put failure in quotations because I don't believe that failure is true failure if you're looking at it with the right mindset.
The truth is, the journey to greatness is hard. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes focus, and every day you have to decide what you value, what you want to pursue, and what you want to achieve. And if you dig deep enough, if you push hard enough, we all have what it takes to be great. Welcome to the Edge of Greatness. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Edge of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Charles Schultz, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, head football coach at Coronado High School, motivational speaker, and powerful leader, making an impact everywhere. I love seeing all your stuff out there on Twitter and social media. Coach Kurt Hines, thank you so much for joining me today.
Charles, thanks for your patience. Your listeners and viewers wouldn't know this, but obviously I had some technical problems on my end, but it's good to finally see you and connect.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to start somewhere a little different than the leadership stuff and where we went, but I heard and I saw that you had to coach against your son. And I'm curious, what was that like for you to have to coach against your son? Because most people want to coach with their kids, and you had to go against them.
Yeah, I know. It's you did your homework. True story. So when I was a head coach in Bedford, New Hampshire, my wife and I raised our 4 children in the neighboring town in Goffstown. And we both were public schools. So it just so happened that his junior and senior year, I had to coach against him. Both games happened to be homecoming games. And it was a big thing in the papers out there and the news stations, and they did little, news briefs and articles and stuff. It was heartbreaking. It really was. His junior year, we had, I was the head coach there for Bedford 7 years, and not I, but we had built a powerhouse. So we felt pretty good going to the game. Like, hey, this, you can never take anyone for granted, but I think we're going to fare pretty well here. And our line coach at the time said, Hines, we get to run this particular play. And there's like on a Tuesday or Wednesday leading up to the game. I'm like, there's no way we're running that. He's like, why? I'm like, because Brockton plays defensive end on that side. We're not kicking out my son, ear holing my son. And he's like, and he got pissed about it. And he's like, what if we have to win the game? We need that play. I'm like, we'll win some other way. We're not doing it. This is not happening. And that first game, it was, I think it was only 21-0 or 28-0 at the half. And I had told the coaches ahead of time. I even, told some of our players. I said, hey, I'm going to be completely transparent. I have to apologize here. This is a different game for me. You guys understand. My family means everything to me. I said, we're hands down. We're 100% going to win. That's our goal, and we're going to do everything we can. But my heart's torn, So I told our staff, I said, if we have a good lead at halftime, we're taking the 1s out. We're taking any 2s out. We're putting 3s and 4s in. And I run up to through the bleachers to go use the restroom at halftime. And my wife's standing up there just like this. And she's my best friend. And she's standing there like this. And she goes, knock it off. I'm like, Jill, it's 20. I think it was 21. I was like, it's 21-0. She's like, knock it off. So I run in, go to the bathroom, run back down. And I tell our staff, like, so here's the deal. We're not running a dang counter, trap. We're just going dive left, dive right, whatever it was in the second half. We ended up winning that first game like 50-6 or something. But their staff and their coaches knew that we literally had and we had 144 young men in the program that year. We had our 4s in, our 5s in. We did it with class, and it's where it was. The great part of that story was his senior year, we had graduated a lot of studs. They had really built up, and great coach that I had coached with years before. And it came down to one of the final plays. They had this defensive end. They had this tight end that was going to Boston College. And we told our DN, listen, Joe, don't let Matt off the line. Don't let this kid off the line at all. I don't care. Whatever else happens, just do your job. Had our safety. We were too high safety. And we said, listen, take your read steps, but no matter what, you are on this kid, Matt. So it really dedicated two players to him. It was one of the final plays of the game. We were up by, I think it was like 13-6 or 13-7. And our DN, who was a stud, whiffed, missed the kid. Our safety, who had been taking his read steps all dang night, came up for run support. He felt he was play action, and he ran past both of them. Quarterback threw the ball, went through his hands, and dropped it. We won the game. But at the moment I'll never forget was, I wear my heart on my sleeve in everything I do, and I'm very affectionate. Even with my children now as adult children, I'll, every time I see them, I'll give them a hug, tell them I love them, I kiss them on the forehead or, cheek, not on the lips. You see some parents do that. It's just, I don't want to offend anyone. That's just not my thing. So as we're walking through, I'm leading our team to walk through and shake hands, and he's at the very end. And I'm saying, hey, good game, good game. And preparing myself, the emotions were high. And preparing myself, when I come up to shake his hands, if he just walks away, I have to give him a space. Like I understand that. I respect that. Not knowing what's going to happen. We got 10 yards from each other, 9 yards, 7 yards. And I saw his eyes, and they were just welled up with tears. So I lost it. I started crying, ended up embracing each other. And it's a moment I'll never forget. And I equate it truly to walking my daughters down the aisle, to officiating one of my daughter's weddings. It was a beautiful moment. Fast forward, I'll make this long story short. Heartbreaking 2 years coaching against your son. This past football season was my 25th year coaching high school football, and our son Broxton coached on the staff with us. So that was awesome. And the first week he came up to me, he's like, Dad, it's so weird. I'm like, what? He's like, 5 of your coaches have come up to me and asked the same question. I'm like, oh, jeepers, where's this going? And I was like, what did they ask? And he's like, is your dad always like this? And he's like, I didn't know where they were going with this. I said, where were they going? And they said, oh, is he always like positive and amped up? And so it was cool for him to see me, not in a different light, but to see, as opposed to being Coach Hines, who we play and coach against, being on the same staff and having the same goal. So this past year coaching with him was a tremendous blessing.
That's awesome. That's a fantastic story. And I'm glad that, honestly, it sounds like this probably ended up being one of those things that was very good to have happen. As hard as it was to deal with in the moment, it's made such an incredible memory to be able to go back and reflect the way you have and to experience that, and then now have him back on staff with you. That's pretty incredible. So
it truly is. And we literally, I pride myself, and some people 100% disagree with this, but we don't meet on Sundays as a staff. I want our families, whether they're a young coach, 24, no family, no girlfriend, I want to have balance in our lives. And I think so often as coaches, we tell our players, hey, or we tell the families, we want to make better young men and young women. Well, if we're doing that, and that's really our goal, I think we need to teach them about pursuing greatness and having balance at the same time. And it was just amazing. So I would see my son more this past year than really I had his entire life, except for when he was a child. So I was seeing him 6 days a week for about 3 hours a day. So it was amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. What does the word leadership mean to you?
The first word that comes to mind is servitude. Servant leadership. It's a blessing. I absolutely love everything about what I do. We just had our football banquet last Sunday, and one of my closing statements, if you will, was thanking everyone again, that the assistant coaches, our spouses, and the families and players, obviously, and just saying I feel like one of the richest men alive. I'm living my dream. I jokingly say there's more truth to this than not. I'm fatter than I should be, and I don't have as much money saved as I should. But I'm living my dream. To be able to lead people. I think if we do it the right way, and if we understand that leadership comes with a responsibility to serve first and foremost. Leadership is all about serving and blessing and empowering others. So for me to be in the role of a leader, and this as a business owner, more importantly as a husband and a father, I tell our teams all the time, every one of you are leaders. And you can kind of see them look at me like, what? I was like, listen, whether you realize it or not, you're going to lead someone down the right path or the wrong path. After a tough loss or a win, some of you guys are going to go eat together. Some of you guys are going to go to a party and do things you shouldn't do. We're all leading people. The question is, how in tune with it are we, and how are we leading them?
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point, because I think a lot of young people especially don't realize you can lead by following, because
Yes.
somebody's looking to you, and if they see you follow and they see you follow well, then they'll go, well, that's what I'm supposed to do right now until it's my time to actually step in front. And I think that there's so much power in owning where you are in the process of the leadership ladder and leading the way you need to in that moment. And I think that that's something that often gets just neglected and overlooked.
Yeah, I love how you said it, Charles. I 100% agree. I think in order to be a great leader, you have to first understand what it means to be a great follower. And I think so often, and I think I've been guilty of this in the past myself, I think we look at followers here, leaders here. And it's not. It's leaders and followers are in the business, for lack of better words, of serving others. If you're following someone, you're serving what their goal is, what their mission is. And if there comes a point where you don't believe in their mission or their direction or goal, I think we have a choice as men or women, as human beings, to not talk behind their back, but have a private one-on-one conversation and say, hey, have you thought about doing this? And they may or may not. Or choosing to go somewhere else and become a leader. And that's the whole reason I became a head coach way back when in New Hampshire. I was blessed my first 7 or 8 years. I was a freshman coach. And at the end of every season, the head coach said, hey, Kirk, come on up to the varsity. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm good, thanks. I love my own little thing. I went into coaching not even with a desire to be a varsity coach. I just wanted to coach the sport. I love it and be a blessing to people. And then what happened was the head coach in the town we lived in reached out to me one year, said, hey, we want to have you coach on our staff. We've coached against you for years. And I went there and I told the coach who first gave me my first coaching job, hey, I love everything about you, the program. Thank you so much. I want to have a chance to potentially coach my own son. My son at the time was in 6th or 7th grade. I went there, and after the first 2 weeks, I told my wife, I'm done. I'm going to honor my commitment, see the year through. But there were just way too many differences. And I'm not even talking about X's and O's, which there were a few, but just how to treat people and how to serve people. So I ended up finishing out the year there, but applying to be head coach at Bedford High School. And I thought, man, I could do a better job than that dude, you know? And I went in very, not cocky, but very confident. And then my first year as head coach in New Hampshire, we set records in the state of New Hampshire. But they're not the records you want. We got our teeth kicked in more than any other school in the history of football, I believe, in the world. But it really did. I always say that my first year as a head coach was my greatest year ever coaching. I truly stand by that. It sucked. It was painful. There were tears. There were sleepless nights. I thought everyone, except for my wife and my own children, were judging and criticizing everything I was doing, and probably rightfully so. But the reason I say it was my greatest year, because I found out what it meant to be a leader and why I wanted to lead. And I think the single most important reason I want to be a head coach and wanted to and still want to be is because we have the blessing and opportunity to set the tone, set the standard, and hire who we want to hire side by side with us to best serve those we coach.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So speaking about leadership, I saw a video that you posted a while back. It actually went pretty viral. So I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, where a young man came in and you were celebrating his decision to quit, which I absolutely love. I think that there is so much strength in that as a leader to say, look, if this isn't what you meant to do, this is okay that you're going to go do something else. But my question is how do we know when it's the right time to quit?
Yeah, great question. I don't know if I've been asked that question. I think that's different for all of us. And without getting preachy to you or your audience, for me, as I think I mentioned off before we started recording, my faith means everything to me. For me, it comes through a lot of prayer, a lot of personal reflection. I think there is a huge negative side to quitting. Yeah, I think if we quit for the wrong reasons, if we quit because it's hard or it's challenging or we didn't achieve what we still want to, but within the time frame, then yeah, I think quitting's bad. But in this particular instance, and I won't recap the whole story, this young man just was never a football kid, didn't like it. His family was a football family. His brother, a year older, was a stud and loved it. This young man just didn't. And when I praised him for doing what I asked, we tell our young men, football is not for everyone. Don't come to me and lie and say, hey, I want to focus on grades. Because I don't believe any high school student goes home at 3:30 at the end of the day or whenever their day wraps up and does homework from 3:30 to 10 at night. They're going to play video games, scroll social media, hang out with their buddies, do whatever. So I tell them, if you decide that you're not passionate about it, come in with things washed, folded, look me in the eye, shake my hand, and say, Coach, I don't love the game anymore. And that's exactly what he did. So I was so proud of him. And when I told him I was proud of him, it was the first time, Charles, that I saw him just go, and he, like, in 2 years, it was the first time I saw him with a genuine smile. And that got me amped up. I was like, thank God, like, yes, you know. And it's funny, I appreciate that you appreciated the take on it, because there were some people, it did go viral and it was on different platforms, news stations, whatever. But there were some people that read the headline. I forget what I called it, or what words I wrote before the video, but they were like, oh, hey, good job, coach. You should get that coaching. Why are you proud of some kid that quit, or why are you happy? And then there were people that attacked me and said, well, great, you just created another quitter. And I'll never get into a Twitter or social media battle with anyone. I think it's pointless. But I did respond to those people privately. I pretty much said, listen, how many of us have dated other young women before until we found the one we wanted to marry? We didn't quit on them. They just weren't right for us. How many of us had jobs? I'm guessing before you opened your gym, you probably worked at a gym or two, you know? And how many of us, yes, we quit those because we saw something better down the road for us. So for this young man, you know, my message to him was, hey, keep following what your passion, and he didn't know at the time, but find something you're passionate about and follow that, and I'll support you just the same.
Yeah, I find it interesting because the word quit definitely gets a variety of responses. And I'm curious, why do you think people are so afraid of the word?
Yeah, that's I don't know. I think both of us, probably everyone that's going to listen to this, has heard the saying. I shared this with our team before too. You know, people say, hey, quitting's not an option. Quitting's not an option. And I hate that, because quitting is an option. Every single day we can quit. And I'm going to go real dark for a second. When people take their lives, and I'm not judging them. There are people who battle things that I have no idea about. They're quitting on their life, and I'm not judging that. There are people who quit all the time through our life. Quitting is always an option. I don't know why it has such a bad connotation, but I think we need to own our decisions, own the choices we make, and realize that if we are quitting on one thing, in my opinion, we should then immediately pick up something else we're going to do and pursue that with greatness. Because if not, we are going to find ourselves kind of going through the mundane, you know, everyday life, kind of just punching a time clock. I don't think quitting's a bad thing, as long as, to get back to your original, you know, point or question, as long as we know why we're quitting and we're not doing it because we don't want to put in the work or it's just too challenging, if it's not the right path for us.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. And I've always wondered, like, what if we were to say, instead of when a young man stops playing a sport, what if he was just retired? Because we don't get on guys when they retire, right?
Right.
This was just his retirement time. He retired now. So he retired earlier than, you know, the end of his high school career. But we all retire from sports at some point.
Yeah, and it's celebrated. Yeah. You're right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then it's celebrated. Yeah, you get a big old party. You get to go out, and you know everyone's all excited. But if you say I'm quitting, you're like, whoa, no.
And you know this as well as I do. I'm born and raised in Barrington, Rhode Island. 95% of my family and friends are all Patriots fans. I've always been a Cowboys fan. It's been a tough few years, but I've always been a Cowboys fan. The reason I say that is Tom Brady, arguably, in my opinion, even though I'm a Cowboys fan, is the greatest quarterback of all time. But even Tom Brady, the GOAT, if you will, it gets criticized for, oh, he doesn't have it anymore, or he does, or he should have retired, or he shouldn't have retired. Or there are going to be people, I think, in regards to quitting, in regards to living our lives, there are going to be people, no matter what we do, they're going to talk behind our backs, criticize the choices we made. Hey, he or she hung on too long, or quit too early, or retired too early. I think we just got to follow our own heart and realize that we only have one shot, as cliche as it may sound. We only have one shot at this thing called life. And if we're not authentically living our best life or striving to, it's all for naught.
No, yeah, definitely. Can you think of a time when maybe you quit too late?
Yeah, before first time I shaved my head, I had a bald spot going, man. I should have started shaving this years ago. Quit too late, you know. Yeah. Once again, full transparency. I've always been the same person, I believe. I've always loved people. I've always loved life. But starting back in, middle school through college, I used to fight way too often. And I should have quit with the attitude when I'd go out in clubs and stuff, or not club. Club sounds like I'm a dancer. I don't dance. But going out in the bar scenes and stuff like that, I think I should have quit the tough guy, persona all too often. And I justified it back then. It's funny now, where one of my teammates and I in high school would go out and say, "Hey, let's go look for guys with attitudes." Now, as I look back at it, I'm like, wait a minute. If you're the guy looking for guys with attitudes, you might be the guy with the attitude. I just loved to fight. Aside from that, no, I mean, been married for 28 years. My wife is my best friend. We haven't been through a lot of, battles with each other, but there's been one or two over the 28 years, truly, that where I thought, oh my gosh, what's happening? And we, thank God, didn't quit on each other and on our family and all that. But quitting where I should have quit earlier, yeah, just honestly, just with my attitude, kind of thinking I was a tough guy. I could have saved my parents a lot of headaches, and I was arrested a lot growing up, just for fighting and getting in trouble. So I think that.
No, that's cool. So one of the things I think is interesting with where you're coming from as a leader and then a coach, and also having a relatively large social media following, is you get to experience and navigate that social media world that a lot of your kids are living in. But what I think I'm most interested in is, how do you handle the negative side of social media and then use that to help the younger people navigate that? Because I think there's so much that happens on social media that it's going to be there. It's never going away at this point. That's part of who we are as people. But a lot of the things that when we were younger, if we got bullied, it was over at the end of the day. But now if you get bullied, it goes on all night. Or if you have a bad day or you have a bad play, people just attack you on social media, even if you're just a kid. I see it with college players all the time. That kid sucks. Well, he's still 18 years old.
Yes.
So how do you manage when you get those comments? How do you work through those negative people in those negative times? And then how can we help teach those younger kids to do similarly?
Yeah, I think, first off, I agree with you 100%. You said it perfectly, but I know I'm older than you, but when we were growing up, there was an end to the bullying. Yeah. You went home and you had a peace of mind. There was an end to whatever. And now it's not going away. I think to just know our why. I think first and foremost, to know who we are spiritually. For me, I know who I am. I know whose I am. I know why I'm here, and I know where I'm going when my time's up. As far as how do we navigate through the negativity with social media, I think it's just being true to ourselves. I'm not proud of this at all. But I used to, probably about 2 years ago, and prior to that, have a thought come to mind like, oh, I should do a video on that. And then I would do the video and think to myself, will this get a lot of likes? We'll get a lot of retweets. I hate that I'm being that transparent. I feel like no disrespect to 13-year-old schoolgirls, but I felt like a 13-year-old schoolgirl. I'm like, really? Do I care that much? And now I just prayerfully, hey, if something comes to my heart, I'm going to put it out there. And if it resonates and speaks to one person, just so be it. As far as the negative stuff and the hate, the first thing that comes to mind is the old saying, if you want to make everyone happy, just sell ice cream. Nowadays, there's going to be someone that's lactose intolerant that gets mad at you for selling ice cream and wants to cancel you. I think you have to take it with a grain of salt and realize, I think most people that spend their time face to face, but I don't think most people are brave enough to do that. And I'm not saying with me brave enough, but with human beings or keyboard warriors. If someone's spending their time attacking you, realize that's a character flaw on their side, and they're probably not happy with some aspect or many aspects of their lives. On all of social media, I think I've only blocked a handful of people, and it's people that when they attack me, I'm not going to block them. But if they're attacking me and it's a bunch of profanity after profanity after profanity, I don't want that content on my page or anywhere. So, but I usually will, when someone comes at me, I'll send them a private message and just be like, hey, here's my thought, and not trying to change their mind, but just trying to have a civil conversation with them. And it's interesting because there was a guy about a year ago or so that was coming after me about something. So I sent him a private message, and we ended up having a good conversation. And I don't think either of us changed each other's minds, but I love the fact that he was willing to have a conversation. So like a day later, I just followed him back on Twitter, and he sent me this like War and Peace length message. He's like, I'm blown away that you followed me. Most people that just block me or whatever. And I'm not friends with him. I haven't met him. I honestly don't remember where he's from in the U.S., but he shared pretty much like he spends his life just attacking people on social media, and that's he's like, that's what I do in my free time. I just get a kick out of it. He's like the first person to follow me back after I did that and have a conversation. And I think we can, without getting on a soapbox, I think we can change some people's minds and hearts if we don't try to get into some pissing contest with a skunk, because they're always going to stink more than we do. But if we just try to be human to them, and but as far as our young men and young women, I think we all fall in love sometimes, for lack of better words, with the amount of followers we have. And this is not my own. I don't remember where I read this, but I love the saying. It says, something like, Hitler had millions of followers, Jesus had 12, or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to just trying to share with our student athletes and to practice what we preach, that what happens on social media is a powerful thing. It can be something that opens many doors or closes many doors, but we're in charge of how we use it. And if it's bringing you joy, use it. If it's causing you more stress and anxiety, get off it. Just stop doing it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because I enjoy social media. I think that it's served me well, because I've met people like you. I meet a lot of the guests that I bring on. I choose who I follow, though, and I'm very mindful of who I decide to let into my feed.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that gets ignored a lot too with the younger kids, is they just start following the popular people, and then they post some things, and then all of a sudden it goes haywire. And so I always like to go down that path with coaches, because I feel like it's such a important piece of what you have to deal with now. That wasn't always the case. It's
right.
become a bigger thing over time. I mean, kids get recruited off of it now. So you have to almost have it, but how do we teach it? How do we navigate it? How do we help them understand, like, look, if somebody's on there getting after you, 100% chance they would never say it to your face.
Yeah.
Like, the people don't come at you in person.
Right. And for my wife and I, our youngest daughter, Sophie, and I was so proud of her when she did this. She got to a point maybe 2 or 3 years ago where she just got rid of Instagram. And I asked her, I was like, well, why? And she's like, I'm comparing myself to other people. And she came to that on her own. I loved that maturity. It was not bringing her joy at all. And I think that's great. I think so often we will follow someone's page that we really don't like them, but we want to see what they're doing, kind of keep up with it. But we wouldn't let them in our own house and have dinner with them. Why are we giving them the realty and the space in our mind, in our hearts? And I'm not saying block them, but don't follow them. It's I think so often, the circle, the whole adage of, keep your circle small. There's a lot of wisdom to that, whether you have a ton of followers or not. And I'm like you. I think, social media has opened up so many doors, as our conversation now, professionally and personally. I always tell our family, I think social media is like a loaded gun. In the right hands at the right time, it's going to save some lives and create some really good things. In the wrong hands at the wrong time, it could do some real serious damage. But we're in control of it.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that. I like that way of looking at it, because I agree. I think there could be some really good that comes out of it, in the right hands, like you said.
Yeah.
So if a young, fresh, right out of diapers, new head coach comes up to you and says, "What's the secret to success?" What's the first thing you teach them? What would you say?
Well, we're playing against them. I would say a lot of different things. No, I'm just kidding. I think authentically be yourself. I think there's a tendency in coaching where we see a successful coach in whatever field, strength and conditioning, football, basketball, doesn't matter what the field is. And we go, oh, well, a coach is going to be like that. They're going to dress like that. They're going to talk like that. They're going to act like that. No, I think sometimes with the best of intentions, we don't give our young men and young women we coach enough credit. They're a lot smarter than sometimes we realize. And they're going to see through the BS. They're going to see through the nonsense. I guess one of the first things I would tell them is, know your why. Why are you doing this? Because if you don't have a strong why, I don't think you're going to last in this game at all. Once you have a strong why, know who you are and build upon that. We can take some things from Tony Dungy or from this coach here or that coach there, whoever it is that we want to maybe emulate a little bit, but we've got to be ourselves. And I think, not everyone can be a Deion Sanders. And if someone tries to be a Deion Sanders and they're not, they're sooner or later, I can't imagine that's going to be so exhausting to not be who you are anyways. But the kids are going to see through it, and it's not going to help them. And then I think also be humble enough to surround yourself with greatness. I think all too often, I love football, I love everything about it, but I think the sport, and I'm sure it's in all sports, is overpopulated with cocky, arrogant, not just players, but coaches who, hey, I'm the head coach. I want to hire other good coaches, but not as good as me because, gosh, what if I'm not everyone's favorite? Well, we're never going to be that good then. I need to surround myself with other people who have strengths that I don't have. Obviously, from a technological standpoint, I need coaches that know what they're doing because I don't. I need coaches that are better on defense than I am. I'm an offensive guy. I think too many coaches think they have to do it all. And now that's why you have a coaching staff, and that's why you have a team. And I'm sure with your business at your gym, you're not the only employee. I mean, I know you're the owner, but I'm sure you have other people that have other strengths that match yours and complement yours and help you.
Yeah. How do we help these young men and young women out there put their ego aside to be able to do something like that?
By example. Yeah, by example. I think one of the things, I was so blessed this year. At the end of last season, so 2 seasons ago, I lost 2 coaches. One got a divorce and had to move away, and one was engaged and his fiance broke it off, so he moved back to Connecticut. So in the process of looking to hire 2 replacements, I interviewed 11 coaches and hired on 7. One was full paid staff, the other 6 were full-time volunteers. They got a very little stipend at the end from our boosters. But it was so awesome because I realized that when you talk about leadership from the very beginning of your podcast, we have to understand that as business owners, as head coaches, as whatever it is, we're not just leading our young men and young women, we're leading our coaching staff. And I think sometimes we also I fell into this trap of thinking, hey, I'm leading this guy, this guy, and this guy because they're new to coaching. But this guy's been doing it for 7 years. This guy was at that program for 10 years. Well, sometimes they've been in a program for 10 years under a jackwagon coach that is transactional and only deals with the studs and walks by the kids that can't put their helmet on straight and can't figure things out. I think we need to model, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people say sports build character. No, they don't. Sports don't just magically build character unless we as coaches intentionally teach and more importantly, model character, because we can say all the right things in front of the boosters, the administration, the parents. But when the crap hits the fan in the game and we start attacking our other coaches and attacking young men and young women and saying words that we wouldn't say publicly in front of people, we lose all credibility and all respect, in my opinion. So I think we need to model what servant leadership is. We need to model what humility is and show when we drop the ball, literally or figuratively, show that not only are we imperfect ourselves, far from it, but that, hey, that's part of our job as coaches. Just like we ask our players to get 1% better every day, we have to do the same thing and demand the same thing, if not greater, from ourselves.
Yeah, no, I love that because I think, like you said, you hear sports builds character. Maybe backyard sports builds character. When kids coach kids and play with kids, then they build character because the bad ones get kicked out and they realize I can't be a jackwagon.
Right.
And they don't come back. Or they figure out how to play with others. But like you said, if you have a bad coach who doesn't do the character things when things go bad, what you're teaching is bad character. So you're not actually teaching character at that point. You're teaching how not to act in tough situations, because when things go wrong, you blame the refs. When things go wrong, you yell at your coaches. When things go wrong, you yell at your players. So what do you think they're going to do when it goes bad? They're just going to do the exact same thing.
Exactly. And for me too, and I know you didn't ask this yet, but it kind of, I think, ties in. As far as leadership and character, it took me, I've coached for high school football for 25 years now. I was a head coach, going on my 14th year as a head coach, 7 years in New Hampshire, going into my 7th year. I used to, when I would hire coaches or interview coaches, reach out, put something out there, meet with someone, and for about 45 minutes to an hour, talk football. And I'd hired some people that knew football that didn't really love or know people. And I thought, man, this is not the right fit for me. So what I do now when I interview coaches is I have them come in for about 20 to 30 minutes, and I try not to talk football at all. And whenever they bring it up, I try to steer it somewhere else. I just want to talk about them, life, because I think everyone has the interview questions. I want to give back. I want to make a difference. Well, everyone says that. But so what happens now is when I interview someone, just talk about life. Tell me about your upbringing, what you're passionate about, what drives you outside of football, what gets you excited. If I have a good sense and I feel like we have a good connection, I'll ask them back for a second interview. And I think you'll appreciate this with your background and what you're doing. I ask them to come into the weight room. And they're like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, I don't care. And I mean that respectfully. You can work out with us. You can just sit in the corner. You can just talk to people. And I tell them afterwards, there are mirrors all around, obviously. Excuse me. And I'll see, someone that says, hey, I just want to give back and make a difference. And they walk right by the real skinny kid or the chubby kid and go to the studs and spend the whole time with that kid that already looks like a friggin' beast, And then one of the coaches I hired this year, and I love all 7 that were new to our staff, one of them had a horrible high school experience. He was bullied. He ended up going to the Marines, served our country for 4 years, 4 or 5, but he had a really, really negative experience. I had a good feeling when I met with him the first time. So I said to him, hey, come into the weight room. And came in, and right away, that first 45 minutes to an hour, I saw him just kind of talking to everyone. And I saw him talking to the kid that weighed as much as the 45-pound bar and all that different stuff. And right away, I was like, I don't care what his football IQ is. I want him on our staff. I can teach him how to teach certain drills, how to teach certain things. And he's only been a year with us now, but he's a gem. He's just going to be a great coach because he loves people.
No, and I agree. I think that coaching isn't about what you know of the sport that you're coaching. It's about how you can connect with the people that you're working with. Can you get them to want to follow your instructions? Because the person who knows the most but can't connect doesn't get anyone to follow anything. And then I've been a part of staffs like that where they're trying to teach X's and O's, but Lever's like, I don't want to hear what you have to say.
Right. And how often, I've always thought this, if being a former professional athlete, tennis, football, anything, made you a better coach, there wouldn't be I would have never been a coach. I played college football, Division III college football. I loved it, but I would have never coached. If being a professional athlete made you a better coach, I don't think there'd be a coach at any high school anywhere that wasn't a former professional athlete. Right. Yes, that can help, in my opinion, if you have humility and a love for people. But if you're just a great athlete, that does not transfer always to becoming a great coach, and vice versa.
I honestly think that if you were a really good athlete, it naturally came easy to you. You actually probably are a bad coach because the things you did because you were just gifted, you can't teach that. Like, well, how do you do that? Well, I just do.
Yeah,
okay,
but, it's funny because I teach elementary school. I taught 1st through 4th grade for years. And people find out I teach, like, oh, you're a PE teacher. I'm like, no, I'm a classroom. Like, I'm in the classroom teaching curriculum. I was not a good student. I always hated math. School was hard for me. And I think that's what makes me a better teacher. And I don't mean better than other teachers, but better than I would have been. Because I understand that I can't just draw to the whiteboard one time and have them get it. Some kids learn that way. A lot don't. So I think, to your point, teaching or coaching or parenting, whatever it is, sometimes having struggled through certain things in life makes us better and better able to serve others.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I'm curious about is, within your organization, how do you teach the power of choice?
I think it goes hand in hand for me with choice and accountability. I'm going to go back for a second. I know you said within our program, but I always tell our 4th graders there are no have-tos. And they're looking at me like, what? I'm like, you don't have to do your homework. I'm like, what? You don't have to do your test. Like, what? And they're little 9-year-old, 10-year-olds. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't have to come to work. They're like, yes, you do. And our principal this year is like this big, Mrs. Hester. I was like, do you think Mrs. Hester can, make me come to work? And they're like, you can see them doing the math. They're like, oh, no, she weighs like your left leg, I'm like, no, I said, but there are consequences. I don't have to drive the speed limit, but there are consequences. I can get a ticket. I can get into an accident. I think it's the same thing, choice for our players. You don't have to show up to the weight room, but there are consequences. You don't have to train. You can go with a personal trainer or a gym all the time. And I know I'm speaking to someone that owns a gym. And I one of the final things, once again, our banquet on Sunday, and I this is the hill I'll die on. I always tell our student athletes, and we had all the parents there, and they legit started clapping for this. I wasn't expecting it, but I told them, I said, if anyone ever tells you to specialize in one sport, they're either ignorant or selfish. And the parents started clapping. I said, if you're passionate about 3 sports, play 3 sports. And then I probably won't see you in the weight room at all because you're going to be playing basketball and baseball or lacrosse and whatever it is. I said, but if you're not playing another sport, come work out with us. And then I tell them, if you have a personal trainer or you go to the gym, do that. Do it 2 or 3 days a week. But they come work out with us 2 or 3 days a week, and we'll work together to make sure you have the proper rest and recovery and all that time. I think choice it's something that's a part of everyday life in all walks of life. I don't have to be faithful to my wife. Well, there are consequences. I could destroy an entire family and for the rest of my life, go chase other women and fool around every weekend and not be fulfilled and not have a sense of pride in who I am as a man. Or I can, through the highs and the lows and everything else, be faithful to my wife, faithful to our commitment, and be an example to our children and grandchildren. So I think for our players and for our coaches, choice, we getting back, I think I mentioned earlier, as a head coach, I never have coaches meetings on Sundays. I want to teach and model balance. So I tell our staff, on a Friday night, we're going to come in. You can stay up till 2 in the morning, like I usually do, and watch film. So I'm prepared for Saturday morning's coaches meeting and practice. Or you don't have to watch film Friday night. Go home and just spend time with your wife or go to bed or whatever it is. But by Sunday at 12 o'clock, we need to have these 3 teams broken down. Do it on your own time. Do it all day Saturday. Do it Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. So I still want our coaches to do their job, obviously. But you're men. Do it on your own time. Do it when it works best for you. For our players, same thing. Like there are certain things you don't have to show up to. You don't have to do an off-season thing at all, and you can still be great. The fact is, there's sometimes you just have athletes that are that good that they can miss every preseason, postseason, off-season workout because they're playing other sports or they're surfing here in California, whatever it is, and they're still great. Why would I hold that against them? Why would I make them feel bad about, hey, you didn't come to every workout? You know what? Maybe they want to be a kid and surf and hang out with a girlfriend or buddies or whatever. But at the same time, I want their level of commitment to match their goals. If they say, hey, I want to be a collegiate athlete, well, then here's what you got to realize. You're a stud for us in Coronado. I love us. We're a Division IV program. It goes in California, it goes to Open Division, which is the highest. Division 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and down. But I realize that you're a big fish in a little pond here. But if you want to go and make it an impact at the next level, whether that's JUCO, D1, or anything in between, realize even at the JUCO level, they're all studs. They were all at one point in your shoes. But I think going back to I think your question, and I'm paraphrasing, but was how do you teach or model choice? Do I have that right?
That's pretty close. Yeah, I just said, how do you teach choice in your organization?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes, I think I hit on that enough without being preachy or blabbering too much.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what I was looking for is that want to, not I don't have to, I want to, right? And you said that. I mean, if you want to do this, go do that. But remember, there's everything you choose in life has a consequence. Everything you choose has something else that's going to happen because of it. And I wish there was more coaches like you, because we work with a lot of athletes that don't come to us because they're afraid their high school coach is going to be mad that they're getting workouts in with us and missing a team workout, or working out with us in conjunction with the team workout and they can't do their normal stuff. And I wish there was just more open communication. And that's definitely something that we try to do, because if you really want to be great, 2 days a week in the weight room is not enough. You need more. You have to dedicate your life to doing it on a regular basis. And
and I think a lot of coaches, I don't think anyone would admit this, but I think a lot of coaches, I don't want you working out at Charles's place and we'll come up with all the excuses. But the fact is, hey, Charles probably knows more than I do. Charles will probably break it down and stuff. And so I tell our players all the time, like, if you have a Charles, I haven't used your name before, but if you have a Charles, by God, go become great with him. Yeah. But let's split the time. And for me, it's if we have the facility at the high school. And that's when I came here as a head coach, my first thing, I was like, man, have you ever been to Coronado, by the way?
I've not.
You got to come out. I'll buy you lunch someday if you do. Right. My wife and I live off island. We live over the bridge, about 25 minutes away. But it's absolutely beautiful. We have the North Island, which has the naval base. So there's a lot of military families, but there's a lot of very affluent families also. So when I applied for the job here, I hadn't been on campus yet, but I was like, man, we must have the best of the best. Our weight room must be phenomenal. When I started like visualizing what it would be like, got the job. First thing I wanted to see was the weight room, and it hadn't been updated in like 25 years.
Oh.
And it was horrible. Not a kettlebell, not a dumbbell, not a bumper plate, not a platform, a lot of machines, leg press. The first thing I did was get rid of the leg press machine, simply because I don't know if this is popular or not. I've had too many players over the years like, oh, my doctor, my mom, my whoever said I can't squat because of my back, but I can leg press 600 pounds. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So we did a complete overhaul, fundraised, built a brand new weight room, literally from the floor up. So we have the facility. I've been the strength coach for 25 years, coach high school football. I don't have your expertise. I don't have a degree in it. So there's a lot I don't know. There's a lot I do know. I learned a lot from Boyd Epley, going to clinics and stuff. But I think too many coaches are, once again, insecure and don't want them going somewhere. I want them coming to work out with us every so often, 2 days a week. I want it 3 or 4 days a week if they don't have someone like you. If they have someone like you, come work out with us twice a week. More importantly, to train with your teammates.
Yeah.
To build that camaraderie, build that culture. But then go work out with Charles where, hey, you probably don't have to wait for equipment. It's probably a little bit bigger, probably a little bit nicer. You can get more one-on-one direction and instruction. But I think it goes back to, why are we truly coaching? If we're truly coaching to give back and bless and empower people, why are we worried about where they're training? Why are we worried about, if they're coming to us all off season and not playing baseball or playing whatever,
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think if we had more coaches in that mindset, we'd have more kids who would love the sport when they're done. And too often I see kids just get destroyed by all the amount of time and effort that they have to put into it and the lack of return on investment from their coaches and from the people in their lives. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really trying to do with what we do is, I want you, when you're done, to make weightlifting your life, because it's a healthy habit to maintain. So if I yell at you for not doing something, odds are you won't come back when you're done.
Right.
But if I just talk to you like a normal human and say, look, this is the reason we do these things. This is the expectation we have. This is why we ask you to be this way. If you want to do those things, you can be here all you want. But if you don't, we're going to have to figure out a balance here, because this has to happen for the safety of others and for and you have to have these standards. But if you yell and you scream and you're always in people's faces and it's just being forced, they're not going to want to do it when they're done. And they're going to just be, well, my workouts are over. I'm just going to go be fat and lazy and it's going to be great. And so same with coaching and sports, because so many times I see kids that get done with sports and they're like, I hate my sport that I played. I'm like, how do you hate it? You spent so much time on it. So as we begin to wind down, because I know you have some other commitments coming up, I want to get to 2 more questions here. And the first one was, I saw a tweet where you listed a series of goals for the upcoming week. How often do you set goals?
Probably quarterly. I mean, it's not a set quarterly time. I'm a big believer in, and I feel like I contradict myself sometimes. I heard the phrase before. I didn't come up with a lot. A lot of people say, oh, you always say, yeah, I say it, but I'm not that smart. I didn't come up with it. But the saying, be where your feet are. And what I tell our players all the time, hey, for the next 2 hours or so, however long our practice is, your girlfriend's still going to be mad at you because you didn't text her back. Your parents still mad because your bedroom's a mess. Your teacher's still mad because you didn't put hand in the paper. But for the next 2 hours, do yourself, do your teammates, do us a favor and be where your feet are. Be here, be present. Coaches, when you go home, be where your feet are. Be with your wife. Be with your children. Manage your time. That being said, I set goals usually quarterly. I love competition. I compete in all things. When my wife and I are playing tennis or my, before my son's wedding just a few months ago, he and his fiance at the time, now the wife, came over for dinner, and I was about 275 at the time. And it was about 3.5 months before his wedding. And we were talking about working out. And I said, I'm going to be 250 by your wedding. He's like, there's no way. I'm like, let's bet. So I bet him $1,000. I said, if I'm not, I owe you $1,000. And I said, when I am, you owe me 100. He's like, I'll take that bet, 100%. And I ended up winning, and I'm getting that 245. And I just thrive on competition. As far as goal setting, I think it's important to have something you're striving for. Whether, someone asked me on a podcast, I think it was last Tuesday or Thursday, they said, what's next for you? What do you want? And I was like, you're going to hate this answer, but I love my life. I love where I am now. That being said, I do want to get healthier. So I know I've got to commit and make that a priority. I do want to do X, Y, and Z. But goal setting, I think, is important. What I did stop doing, and I'd love your thought on this. When I first became a head coach in New Hampshire, I would sit down with every player individually at the end of the season and say, what are your personal goals? What are your team goals? What are your academic goals? I stopped doing that because my personal experience was 99.9% of them would say all the things that I think I wanted to hear. And then it didn't, and I would suggest, hey, tape this up in your bathroom mirror so you can see it every day and look at it every day and have a reminder. But their goals and what they wrote down didn't match their commitment to what they were doing, and that's with supporting them playing other sports and all that stuff. So I talked to our players about setting goals. I said, but that's between you and God, you and yourself, and you and your own character, your own integrity. But personally, for myself, I set goals all the time because I think there's got to be something you're always kind of striving to achieve to keep us, just getting 1% better every day. I want to be a better husband today than I was yesterday. And I think I did it. My wife and I got into a car accident yesterday.
God.
Yeah.
Everyone okay?
Yeah, we are. Thank God. Yeah, it was
All right.
$2,000 damage to the back of my wife's car. Good news, it wasn't my truck. Hopefully she doesn't listen to this one. No, but we didn't get injured. The guy that hit us didn't get injured, and we didn't get hit into the car that was right in front of us. But I guess my point, I was a pretty good husband yesterday. I was supportive and no problems. We had a great time. I want to be better today. And I think if we can set the goal of every Sunday or every day waking up and saying, God, thank you for today. Help me to be a little bit better. Not than Charles, not than Joe, not than Tom, but let me be better than I was yesterday. And if that's our goal, we may or may not do it, but at least we're striving to be a little bit better.
Yeah, no, I think teaching goals is a hard thing because, like you said, a lot of times, especially when they're younger, they want to say what they think you're going to want to hear. They want to make you happy, make you proud. And so it takes a while to make it clear, like, look, these are your goals. And I don't know what the right answer is on how to teach that for everybody, but I do think that you're right, that we need goals, we need deadlines, we need things that we're striving for. We need those things that are pushing us to continue to chase the next thing. And for me, like, I just did a 24-hour fast yesterday because I wanted to challenge myself mentally to see if I could sustain from food. And it honestly wasn't as bad until the last hour, because that's when I'm close. So my mind's telling me I'm going to eat. But I want to continue to push that. I want to push that limit. I want to see what my mind is capable of allowing me to do. And those are the goals that I have. But if we don't have those, we don't keep reaching. We don't keep climbing. And so it is an interesting problem because, like you said, sitting down with everybody and having the right goals and everyone writes the same goal doesn't do any good, because that's not their goal. That's not the truth.
And I think both you and I are in the same business, in that we're in the business of serving others and helping them achieve whatever their desired goal is. And if we as business owners, as trainers, as coaches are not leading by example, we had 4 managers this year, and the 3 young women and 1 young man. And the young women would always be making cookies, almost every other week, it seemed. And in practice, coach, we have cookies for the guys, and they come off, and they looked great. But I was in the middle of a competition with my son, and I love sweets way too much. You're like, Coach, do you want? I'm like, I don't. They're like, you don't? Like, no, I do. Actually, I want that desperately, but not more than a goal. And it wasn't premeditated, but I know a lot of the players saw me declining that and turning down that one little cookie, or which would have turned for me into 2, 3, or 4. I think we've got to lead by example. One of my favorite coaches growing up in high school, love the guy, love him. He's huge, and not in a good way. He was a massive man then. He's a massive man now. Loved us as players, so I've always loved him. But I remember looking back, and he would always be like screaming Hines or Bianco or different teammates' names. You're running slow, and you're slower than molasses. All these different sayings. And I remember I wouldn't ever say it because he would have killed me, but also because I loved him. But I was thinking to myself, I remember thinking as a high school student, Coach, you can't, I wouldn't say it, but Coach, you can't tie your own shoes. Like your belly's too big. Now, that didn't take, because his heart was so great and he cared so much, I would never say that. But I think we've got to lead by example with goal setting, with hey, we're not always going to be able to squat, clean, deadlift, snatch as much as our athletes or who we train, or hopefully not, if we're going to be successful, but we can still perform the lift and still model and teach it for them. And there's a lot of weight to that.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Coach Hines, I've absolutely enjoyed this conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. What I want to do now is give you a chance to connect with my listeners. where can they connect with you, follow what your journey's going through, and some of the stuff you got coming up in the future?
Yeah, no, Charles, thank you. Honestly, I'll say this while we're still recording. I think I've been on like 77 or 78 podcasts now over the past few years. You do a great job. I enjoy this. Truly, I really enjoyed this. So thank you. Any of your listeners, just like we tell our players, don't have fast cleats, 69 as your handle, or have your real name, real picture. It's Coach Kurt Hines, KurtHines. And that's the same for Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, although I don't do the dances on TikTok. It's the same content I put out everywhere else. But yeah, and if any of the listeners want to reach out for anything, questions, whatever, I make it a point to connect with and respond to everyone that reaches out to me, whether it's a complimentary or a hate, whatever it is, I do want to connect with them.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Again, thank you so much. I'll make sure all that ends up in the show notes so they can get a hold of you and connect. As always, guys, keep reaching for the stars. Fall flat on your face. Remember, whenever we fall, always get up.
Thank you for joining us today on the Edge of Greatness podcast. If you haven't yet, please take a minute now to subscribe and review our show. Join us again next week as we continue to dig deeper into the key components of greatness. The path to greatness is never linear, so remember to keep pursuing greatness no matter what. Keep stretching your abilities, reach for the stars, and fall flat on your face. But remember, no matter what happens, whenever we fall, always get up. Until next time, I'm Charles Schultz, and this was the Edge of Greatness podcast.